Hello, beautiful people. It's Lulu. Today's episode is going to be different. I want to strip everything back and be probably more honest than I've been on this podcast ever. Not to burden you with my struggles, but because I believe that sometimes the most valuable thing I can offer isn't a perfect solution, but the truth of my own journey, in the hope that you'll see parts of your own journey reflected in mine. Last week, I shared an episode about confidence, clarity, and calm. And something profound and very unexpected happened. As I uploaded that episode, after all the preparation, the show notes, the key takeaways, the quotes, I felt this wave of shame wash over me. Because in that moment, I wasn't feeling confident, I wasn't feeling clear, and I was definitely not feeling calm. And I thought to myself, where is the truth in all of this? Part of me wanted to just delete the episode, get rid of it, and record something else. But then I realized that wouldn't be serving you, and that is so important to me. This podcast journey has been both wonderful and terrifying. Every week, this podcast holds up a mirror, and every word I speak gets reflected right back to me. So today I'm asking myself and sharing with you a question that feels deeply important and painful at the same time. What do I do when I can't find my own light? What happens when I'm using all my own tools and I'm still in a really dark place? I'm sharing this because I know I'm not alone in these moments. And perhaps you're experiencing something similar right now. And I want to say the words out loud that many of us may be afraid to say, or think that by saying them, we are a failure. Especially if you're a life coach who's supposed to have it all together. Even in my signature welcome to the Lulu Essey podcast, where we do things differently. There's no editing here and no polish. These are real, raw, honest conversations that give you practical tools to transform your life from the inside out. Even in these few lines, I was asking myself, how real, how raw, how honest am I truly willing to be with you? So get ready, because I'm about to take this to a whole new level. And it's probably going to get messy, really messy. And what I promise you is that I will be real and honest, and probably uncomfortably so. I've been going through intense stress, and like I have spoken about before, really unsettling and palpable uncertainty at work. And this uncertainty is not imaginary. It has been confirmed. However, it's not helpful to get into the specifics, because that's just a distraction from what's important here. And besides, there is way too much to unpack there. So let's set that story aside. What is important is that this sustained stress has triggered something deeper. I haven't been sleeping. I haven't been eating as well as I regularly do. I'm finding it much harder to get a handle on my thoughts. And I find myself in this dark place where I feel out of control and overwhelmed. And for someone who has faced real challenges with my mental health and who knows the triggers to be mindful of, they are all here in full force. Plus, I realized somewhere along the way, I'd bought into this idea that to be a life coach means having things perfectly figured out all of the time. And that when I get lost or off track, that I should always be able to find my way back quickly, instantly, magically. And that honestly, being a life coach means that I should never get lost in the dark. Simply put, that is a lie, and a painful and damaging one at that. And it's a huge burden to carry, and it's one that I willingly chose to pick up. This podcast is holding up a mirror to my life every week, and with every word I put out there, it gets mirrored back to me. And while I find it much easier not to judge others, I find it incredibly difficult and completely impossible at times not to judge myself. I was struggling to have compassion for myself. I was struggling to be okay with my own darkness and my own struggle. And I asked myself, can I tell my listeners the truth? I talk about being real, but can I be completely real and honest, fully? Do I love myself enough to tell my listeners the truth and risk everything? Risk the judgment, risk some people not wanting to continue to listen, risk being vulnerable in the most visceral way. Am I brave enough to do that? Do I have the courage? By having this conversation with you today, I'm answering that question. Yes, I love myself enough, and I respect and love you enough to tell you the truth. And I hope that by doing so, it gives you space to live your truth too. Once I answered this question for myself, something began to shift and soften. Slowly. I speak about the starting place of transformation being self-awareness. And that's exactly what led to this conversation. A deep sense of awareness about what was happening. The part I was struggling with was having this awareness with curiosity instead of judgment. I was not able to witness my thoughts without judgment. I was unable to disconnect my identity from my thoughts. I became them entirely. And the more I tried to disentangle myself from my own negative thoughts, the more trapped I became. It was like my thoughts were running the show, and I was drowning in a sea of negativity and darkness. I would stand in the shower practicing in this moment only. And as I put my hand on my heart and said, in this moment only, I am safe. In this moment only, I am breathing. In this moment only, I have choices. As I said that, the tears were streaming down my face, and the moment of relief I got felt like a millisecond. Why is this happening? Why? I have all these tools. I am teaching others how to use them, and still, here I am, stuck. The vortex of darkness sucked me in, and it felt awful. And I felt completely heartbroken, like a failure. But here's what finally started to open, a tiny crack of light. The moment I stopped resisting what I was feeling, the moment I stopped the judgments, the moment I just accepted that I was in a really dark place and made that okay, that is when things started to shift and the heaviness started to lift. But I want to be really clear. This acceptance, this letting go, this releasing of judgment did not happen in one grand dramatic moment. It happened little by little. And sometimes the littleness of it was so tiny, I was barely able to feel it. I sensed it more than I felt it. This was not a grand epiphany, no lightning bolt moment, and I can promise you that I would have given anything for a lightning bolt size moment. Anything. No. This was like a trickle of water, tiny, tiny drops, not a gush. And there were specific things that did help me. I was mindful and intentional with my language, saying, I feel shattered, rather than I am shattered. I feel overwhelmed, rather than I am overwhelmed. I moved my body and found minutes here and there to go for short walks, even though my exhaustion was intense and my work demands were relentless. And I kept Grace by my side, and she came with her friend Gratitude. And I found gratitude for the most seemingly mundane yet beautiful things. Water flowed when I opened the tap, or what we call in America the faucet. My sheets were clean. I had a candle to light every day. I breathed with ease. My foot is almost fully healed. Music, fresh, clean food. I found so many things to feel gratitude for, and it's always like balm for my soul. When I focused on what I had to be grateful for, seeing the first blossoms in Central Park was a huge moment of gratitude. These tiny moments had a profound impact. They were pinpricks of light in the darkness. If you're in that place right now where nothing seems to help, where you can't see the light, I want you to know that's okay. One thing I know to the core of my being is no matter how dark it gets, there will always be light. Sometimes we just can't see it yet, and we cannot feel it, and that is when we need faith. And I'm not veering into religious territory now, although you're welcome to go there. I mean true faith in the goodness of life. I want to talk about what it actually looks like, or better said, what it feels like when you're really struggling with your mental health. Because this was clearly a mental health struggle, a crisis for me. When I'm incredibly stressed and emotionally in a precarious place, my words don't flow. I become forgetful. My sentences feel jagged. My speech feels disjointed, and I get easily confused. I panic, and I know intellectually this means that my amygdala is activated and I'm in flight or fight mode. But I do not want to get lost in the neuroscience in this episode. I want to stay with the feeling. I feel incapable in those moments. I feel handicapped, and I feel like everyone is judging me and I am letting them down. I feel like there is this giant spotlight and a giant microscope on me, and I'm being exposed. And it was when I was feeling that way that I was particularly challenged by someone on my team, more senior than me. And while I knew the response to what was being asked of me in my head, by the time it fell out of my mouth, it was a mess. During this past week, I was constantly in situations where I had to show up as a leader and speak, often to some who weren't particularly receptive, and it was deeply humiliating. I wasn't showing up as my best self. I was showing up as my real self. And here's the truth. Sometimes the world isn't receptive to our real selves. Sometimes people don't actually give a shit whether you're having a mental health challenge. So what do we do in those moments when we still have responsibilities and functions to perform? All I can say is we do the best we can, and it might not sound like much, but it is everything. The best we can do is enough. And if others judge us, let them, but let's not judge ourselves. We cannot control what others think of us or how they evaluate us. Nothing good comes from trying to control or predict that. Finding self-love in those moments was effing difficult. It was near impossible. But I want to share something that I found myself repeating over and over to myself in the darkest moments in this past week. I will not abandon you. I will not abandon you. I'm right here. And I just held on when everything else around me felt like it was crumbling. Those words, I will not abandon you, became my lifeline when everything else felt like it was exploding. Those words didn't fix anything, but they anchored me. I whispered them between meetings. I repeated them silently when my voice cracked during a presentation. They were the promise I made to myself when it seemed like there was nothing else to hold on to. It wasn't eloquent or profound. It was desperate and it was real. And sometimes that whispered promise to ourselves is the thread that pulls us through the darkness. That promise creates a foundation for everything else to rebuild upon. I know what it is like to feel abandoned, and whether that abandonment is real or imagined is not the point here. I know the deeply distressing feeling that accompanies abandonment. And I promised not to do it to myself. And I want to invite you to examine your own life with compassion, with love, and with care, and ask yourself, do I abandon myself in these moments? It's such a powerful question to ask, to explore, to examine, and always be compassionate with yourself. During those moments, I wasn't the coach who had it all together, nor was I the creative leader who had all the answers. I was a human who was struggling, and I was holding on by a tiny, fragile thread that felt like it would snap at any moment. And can we be all these things at the same time? Yes, we can. Many truths can exist at the same time. I can be a life coach to other people, a creative leader, and struggle at the same time. That is the beautiful, messy complexity of life. I talk about being gloriously messy, but this experience made me ask myself, how messy am I willing to show myself to be? This was an effed up level of messiness. Many people call it a dark night of the soul. And I know that as a podcaster, I'm supposed to be thinking about search optimization, keywords, and all the ways to make this episode discoverable. I spent days wondering, how could I possibly incorporate SEO optimized phrases into something this raw? But honestly, screw the algorithm. Some things just need to be said as they are, without polish or optimization. This is one of those moments where being real matters more to me than being found. Oh, and then there was the LinkedIn algorithm, because now I am posting on LinkedIn. And how do I make this digestible and acceptable to a business audience? Well, I have no idea. This is what messy looks like. And is business any different from real life anyway? And do we as leaders really have the courage to be vulnerable and put it all out on the line, even when we know people might be judging us, assessing us, and measuring our worth based on our productivity and how we present outwardly? I am willing to be as messy as my journey calls me to be. I am willing to be as raw and as honest as I can be about my pain, about my struggles, and also about my way through, because there is a way through. Sometimes we just can't see it, and we sure as hell cannot feel it. It's not on our schedule, goddammit, and it doesn't dance to the beat of our drum. It has a rhythm and timing all of its own. I felt like life cracked me open, and I was not able to separate the facts from the feelings. The story of what was going on was absolutely consuming my mind, and I want to be clear. I was accountable for this, but I was not accountable for people who were behaving poorly around me. The difference is I needed to let go of that and just let it be, because that is what I had no control over. It was only by being willing to let the darkness be the darkness and surrender to it that I found threads of freedom. That's where the crack of light started to come through. And letting go is sometimes the hardest thing we can do, because it feels so counter to our survival. We've been taught to hold on, to control outcomes, to exert our influence over circumstances outside of ourselves. So I don't want to minimize the sheer enormity of letting go and how profoundly difficult it can be. And like everything else in life, it takes practice, and it's goddamn scary. But it's the best we can do to begin to come back into alignment with who we are and what we want. So for me, that meant being aware of the darkness, which I was so aware of, and then accepting that is where I was. And here's the tough part: acceptance without judgment and without attachment to how fast the darkness shifts. I am not my thoughts ever, and neither are you. And when all of this happens within the container of self-compassion, the gifts are quite remarkable. And I realized I was being very mean with myself. I had incredible judgments about how I should be in the world and what progress should look like, including what confidence, clarity, and calm should look like. In last week's episode, I said true confidence comes from knowing that whatever life throws at you, you will be able to handle it. And that I do possess. I may not have been thinking confident thoughts. Thinking takes place up here in our heads, but I have a knowing that lives in my heart. And knowing is more powerful than any thought will ever be. And I know in my heart that I have what it takes to handle whatever life puts in my path. So I want you to hear me when I say confidence doesn't always mean thinking confident thoughts or doing power poses or affirmations or incantations. Confidence is a knowing, and sometimes that knowing whispers so softly we are unable to hear it with our ears. But if we are still enough, we can feel it. We can hear it in our hearts. As for clarity, I take tiny steps all day, every day. Where I went off track was wanting to see the immediate impact of those tiny steps. And like I always say, they compound. And last week, I just couldn't see the impact. But they were compounding. And now I can feel the impact of each minuscule, tiny step I kept taking forward. And calm, well, calm stays sometimes for seconds, sometimes hours, sometimes days or weeks. For me last week, it was seconds, and that's enough. It was the best I could do with what I had. I am enough. So why am I sharing all of this with you? Why this confessional, so to speak? Because I want you to feel loved and accepted. And I want you to feel that your experience is valid, no matter how it looks. I want you to feel supported by these tools and not judged by some imaginary standard of how it should look. And I want you to know that messy can sometimes be a very bloody, scary place, and that is okay. I want you to feel empowered to use these tools, to experiment and make them your own. And please never ever feel like you are failing or that I am judging you. You get to do this your way, and let's not make darkness wrong. Let's support each other to embrace it as just another step, and embracing it can be terrifying. Letting go and accepting sometimes takes time. It can happen in an instant, but it seldom does. So let it happen incrementally. Dark is not wrong, and messy is not bad. And yes, we can be leaders and coaches, mothers, fathers, sisters, brothers, friends, partners, and be completely terrified and overwhelmed at the same time. These truths are not mutually exclusive. So in telling you that I was not by any means okay, in fact, I was drowning in darkness and despair, I am hoping that you will find the space to feel compassion for yourself and not make yourself wrong. We can do this, and we can do it together. And the tiny way to big impact is shining even brighter for me today than it was last week. I suppose the other thing is not thinking that because I came through this time, there won't be another dark night of the soul. I'm sure there'll be many more to come. And I don't particularly look forward to them, but I know I will handle them, and I hope to be more compassionate towards myself and more graceful in the process each time. More self-compassion and a little more grace, that's enough. I am enough. You are enough. And when we cannot see the light, when we cannot feel it, or even sense it, let's bring acceptance to that moment. Acceptance without judgment. Let's not force a flicker of light. Let's just stay in the dark and trust that the light will return. When life cracks us open, let's do what we can to let go and accept, one moment at a time, one small breath at a time. Because like the Japanese believe, the crack is where the light comes in. My intention for you is to feel loved and supported and seen. This isn't a race or competition to see who does this the best and the fastest with the most amount of joy. It's a journey, and we are on it together. My promise to you is not perfection, but honesty and support. Whether I'm standing in the light or finding my way back to it. This week, I'd love for you to practice some self-compassion. If you feel called to, DM me on Instagram at lulu.essey with the word compassion, and share one way you're being kind to yourself during these hard times. Your experience might be exactly what someone else needs to hear. And please share this episode with people in your life that you love and care about, especially if they struggle with their mental health. And as always, what comes from the heart reaches the heart. And today, like every day, with honesty, love, and compassion, this comes straight from my heart to yours.